that you're more comfortable with, feel free to use these packets just as a starter set and in case you don't have any brushes at home. But if you have other ones that you'd like to explore using, feel free to do that. Same applies to everything else too. I know I just finally got myself a real painting palette, and it feels nice to use that rather than a paper plate. So feel free to make those changes, okay? But we do want something to mix our paints on. We'll want a paper towel and a cup of water. Also, I like to have the instructions handy. Sometimes I'll be explaining things and maybe the way I explain it just doesn't quite click for you, or sometimes I'll just not explain it the best way possible, okay? So I do want to recommend you guys having the instructions next to you. I know we all learn in different ways, and that might be a helpful tool, okay? The one other thing we'll need to find in our box for the Creative Box Live is our graphite paper. So it looks like this. One side is going to be lighter, the other side will be darker and glossier. And we're going to use this to transfer the image of these owls onto our canvas. So find the printout of the owls, the traceable. Find your graphite paper and flip it so that the glossy side, the darker glossy side, is facing down. Go ahead and position the piece of paper on there, and it doesn't quite fit perfectly, so make sure it's kind of centered. And then I just use the back of a brush, but you could use a maybe like a mechanical pencil, and you push on the lead, whatever works best for you. Something with a point, but not so sharp it's going to poke through the paper. And we're just going to go ahead and trace all of the important lines. Now there are a lot of details in here. I do recommend not tracing all of them, okay? It'll start to get muddy, it'll start to get too complicated if we do that. So go ahead and just pick the ones that are most important. I'm going to go ahead and put the trees on there. Go ahead and throw those branches on there. And as we do this, start to kind of feel out the painting. What's happening on there? Feel the weight of the snow that you're adding on top of those. This is the background tree here. Or this is the tree that this is a tree behind them. So we can picture that distance there. All right, for the owls, I want to definitely give them their silhouette. So we want to outline those for sure. I want to mark where the neck is here because we'll be doing some shading around there. And I want to give at least a mark for the eyes. So I'm going to just skip the middle one because that seems to be too much and just do the center of the eyes and the biggest circle. We want a little bit of room to breathe for our brush strokes to kind of explore themselves a little. So I'm just doing the center circle and the biggest one. We can do this little cap on the head. That's where our copper paint is going to go. And then I'll get this chin here because this shows where they're looking. So we can see on this one it's kind of looking up. You can see the curve of the chin is going upwards, and on this one we can see it's facing straight at us. All right, and then to check it, just kind of peel it up from one side in case there's any lines you missed. That way you can roll it back down and get them. So I totally missed the ears on this guy. I don't know how that happened. There we go. Once you are sure that you have all the lines on there, we can go ahead and remove that, and we've got our sketch for the painting. All right, we're going to go ahead now and jump in with the background, okay? So we're going to start in with this wash brush, the large flat, and go ahead and take that paper plate that we'll be using as a painting palette, and we'll need white and red and yellow for this. Now you can see the example on the top left of your screen there. It's got a lot of red to make it a pink. There's going to be a little bit of a yellow to bring in a tinge of orange, and that's going to really help complement the eyes on this painting, the eyes of those owls. So give a nice generous amount of white. We won't need a ton of red or yellow, so start small. We can always take more if we need it. And we're just letting ourselves kind of settle into our art practice for the day. All right, we're going to start in with that background now. These paints are water soluble, so the water is going to be used to thin them out, to help work them together and mix them, and to smooth it out. If you think of a painting like Van Gogh's Starry Night, where the paint is very thick on there, first of all, it's probably a thicker variation of acrylic paint, but they're also not adding a whole lot of water into it. On this one today, we want a nice thin background. If you look at that example there, it's very flat and thin and distant. It makes the sky look very clear and crisp. You can feel that winter dry sky. So we want it to be very thinned out with the water. So I'm just taking a little puddle of water right here next to my white, because that's what we're starting with. And find what works for you with this. I like to do a lot of mixing on the canvas itself, but if you'd rather, you can mix a light pink right here. One thing to note though is that the weight of colors, okay? So the white, the red is going to be much heavier than the white. So just a little dot right here of the red, mix in with some of our white. Okay, slightly bigger dot. It's going to make it pink pretty fast. We can start with a kind of medium pink right up at the top there. And now we're paying more attention to the sky than everything else. Okay, we're going to put the other elements on top of this sky. Going to place them on top. The important thing right now is getting the sky just the way we want it. So even if you trim off a little bit of this guy's ear, or if you overlap into the tree, that's okay. We can cover it up because we're not working with watercolor today. So this paint does allow us to make those mistakes and cover them up. Or maybe they're not mistakes. Maybe we planned it all along. So it's important that we're really prioritizing that nice smooth sky and not just color blocking. All right, you can go ahead and trace along those ears. Again, remembering we want to keep our focus on the sky. And we want our lines to go horizontally. This is just because the shading on the painting is going from dark to light in a very horizontal, very flat manner. And we don't want to introduce too much motion back here. Now there is a little break right here between these branches that I want to throw in here. And you can add in some other ones too. Like right here, it would make sense to have a little bit of a break between these branches. There we go. Got this space down here. Now the paint is going to dry pretty fast, so we want to do some shading on it before it fades. Let's bring that pink down just a little bit further so that we're even, and then let's get to our shading. And with these colors, there's no right or wrong. It's good to remember that. If you are not a fan of this pink, you can go ahead and change it right away, okay? You don't need to even start out with the exact same color if you'd like. Just keep in mind that we want this to show up, okay? We don't want it to get too dark or anything. All right, now that we've got it down to here, let's go ahead and start lightening it up as we go. We're going to add a lot of white on the brush. I didn't even clean out the brush because we're going to blend it. I just added some white. We can go ahead and go to the next layer here, the next phase of this color. We want it to be significantly lighter so that by the time we get down here, it's really nice and light. We want to get in between the legs of these guys, in between the two of them. And notice I'm overlapping the lines just a little bit. Again, prioritizing getting that background the way I want it. And knowing that we can fix any mistakes, any spots that overlap the elbows, we can fix that later. Now, if you want a little bit of a darker sky, we can, before this part dries, we can go in with a little bit more red and start way up at the top here. Now we'll use a little bit of water to help wake up the paint. It looks like it might be starting to dry on us. So a little bit more red up here, and a bit more water. And now if you want some more yellow in yours, for that nice rich orange, pink orange that we see in the example, let's go ahead and add in just a little bit of yellow now. I'm going to start from the top with this. Just a touch of yellow. There we go. That helps kind of turn it to a little bit more of a salmon-y, salmon pink. And we can start to bring that down here. Now some of the paint has already started to dry, so this is kind of working as a second coat. We want to make sure we're doing the same thing we did as on the first coat. We want to be prioritizing this background, keeping our brush strokes, or at least our final brush strokes in each section, going horizontally. Add a little bit of water on there. There we go. Got that really nice, beautiful color. All right, we're going down a little bit further here, heading towards the bottom section, not forgetting the insides of branches here. And I know this is looking really messy, you guys, but you've got to really focus on the background, okay? So squint your eyes on it if you need to really see that as a background sky, one solid motion. Last little section of it here. Take whatever you have on your brush and let's get it down close to the bottom, so within maybe an inch. And then we'll finish it off with some solid white paint right down here. And blend that into what we've already got on there. And when we're blending, we're just carrying that light into the dark, dark back into the light. And again, from the light into the dark, dark back into the light. As many times as you need to, so that it's nice and smooth. So for our sky now, we have this going on. And maybe you ended up with a bit more of a flat, smooth color. Mine's got some variation in it, and I kind of like that. It feels like maybe we've got some clouds in there. It plays with the imagination, and that should be one goal when we're creating art, is to give some hints of things for people's imagination to kind of jump off of. All right, I want to remind you guys that we don't have to go at any specific pace, okay? So don't feel rushed by me. If you're not happy with your sky, acrylics cover really well, so you can give it another try, okay? Go ahead and pause the video and continue when you are ready to continue. For those of you who are keeping up with me here, and I know I can sometimes paint a bit fast, so no worries if you're not. We're going to go ahead now and fill in our owls. So we'll have to mix this brown. You may have noticed we don't have a brown color among our paints today. But we can mix a brown using 3 colors that create a triangle on our color wheel. And we happen to have these 3 today. We've got blue, red, and yellow. And so we can mix a brown from those. So we already have the yellow and red on here. If you ran out, go ahead and get a little bit more. But grab a little bit of blue to help match it out. All right, leave your background brush in the water cup, and we're going to switch over to the small round. The brush that is both small and round. Get a little bit of water on it. And I'm going to begin with my red and blue. I just pull a little bit off to the side and balance it out with blue. So it should be about 50-50 between the red and the blue for a nice deep violet. And then go ahead and take a scoop of yellow and toss that in here. And now it's just going to be a balancing game. So if you look at yours, and maybe you're seeing too much green. On mine, I'm seeing a bit of this color. So we just have to add the opposite. So more red and more yellow. I'll leave this out actually so you guys can see it. As you're mixing, whatever color your brown is looking too much of, go to the opposite end and add that. So mine is looking too green, so I need some more red. It's also looking a bit too blue, or violet almost, so we can add some more yellow into it. If yours is looking too orange, you can go a bit heavier on the blue. So mine happens to need a lot more yellow. It can be helpful, by the way, to use a palette knife or a larger brush to help with your mixing. All right. And once you feel like you have a balance, we can go ahead and continue. Again, I want to show this right here. Feel free to pause the video there if you need to look at that longer and get just the right color. But whatever you have too much of, for instance, if yours is looking too blue, or well, if it's looking too blue, you'll want to add the opposite. So that'll be more red and more yellow to make that orange. If it's looking too green, you'll need the opposite. Add some red. Okay? So look at this and find what you need to mix the proper brown. And it's good to learn it this way, I believe, instead of just following a recipe, you know, one part this, one part that, two parts that. I think it's good to really learn the thought process behind it. And what's cool about mixing brown this way, instead of just using it from a bottle, is we have an opportunity to create some different types of brown. We could create a bit more of a yellow brown. We could create a bit more of a violet brown, or a red brown. So I want mine to lean a little bit more towards red because we're going to be using copper as the highlight. So that's just a personal preference. You can do it however you'd like. You can leave it perfectly in the middle if you'd like as well. But because we're adding copper as a highlight, and copper is a bit of an orange color, I want a little bit more red and maybe a bit more yellow. All right, once you're satisfied with the color, let's go ahead now. And we're going to fill in our owls. And again, you can do this however you'd like. You could either do one and then the other, or just work on both at the same time. My recommendation is to do both at the same time. That's how I'll be showing it here, because that just allows you to have them match a little bit more. And this is where it's good that we didn't go overboard with all of our pencil lines, because we're going to lose most of them anyway. So even if we had traced all of those lines and gotten them just perfect, most of them are going to get kind of hidden here. So as you cover them though, pay attention to where they're at. Learn the shape of this owl. Trace its feathers here. If you need to consult your sketch here, you can do so. It's okay to make some creative decisions. On mine, I'm choosing to get rid of the little gap between the legs here. I think the owl looks just fine with kind of a round penguin bottom there. Having a little bit more of a red-brown will also go well with the red in the background, as well as the kind of orange-yellow eyes that these guys have. So it's good to kind of think about that stuff as we go. And that's what goes into making a painting and choosing as an artist which colors you're going to use, and also which ones you're going to eliminate from a painting. It's just as important. And so on this one, the focus is on red, and that means the exclusion of most other colors. We've got red, we've got a bit of yellow to highlight it, and then the copper variation. But besides that, there's no other real colors in it. And that's done intentionally. All right. You can leave a little bit of like a white gap here between them if you'd like to help find your spot. Trace that wing on there. Having it come out a little bit from the body. Make sure we're looking at the penguin, they became penguins in my mind. Make sure we're looking at these owls as a whole and seeing all their shapes in balance. Maybe this one looks like it's tipping over too much. Mine does feel that way. So I can bring this line out a little bit more to help balance it. I'm leaving the circles of the eyes untouched. We want this cap on them to be sort of centered. And symmetrical. It's a very important thing when we're doing faces, living creatures. We want symmetry. All right. Now, as soon as we're done with that, we can go ahead and add in some of the lighter shading, some of the lighter feathers. So I'm going to take a little bit of white and just mix it with whatever's still on my brush there. For a color like this. Now I want to mix a little bit more though, so I'm taking a bit more white and then I'm going to take a whole scoop of this brown. Sometimes if you're working on the painting by yourself, it's tricky to explain in this class, that's why I don't attempt it, but sometimes I just go in with a pure white because the brown underneath is still wet, and so you'll get some more variation of the color. But because I was trying to slow it down, we're trying to keep pace all together, we're mixing a light brown instead of going in just with the white. Now, again, we've got the painting example on the top left of our screen and the printout right here. And that's going to be valuable right now in finding where the different elements go here. So we've got this ring. Looks kind of like a necklace almost. And this guy's turned a little bit, okay? So the point of it is going to be also turned. It's not perfectly centered. But you can go straight down from the beak to find that spot. We want these short little jagged brush strokes. Feel those feathers as you create it. We've got some on the underside of the wing here too. Give it a nice curve as it comes in. Just like that. We have the underside right here of this guy as well. And notice it's mixing with that brown. And that's kind of our goal with it, okay? So if you, like on this side, if it's not mixing with it, I'll show you what we can do in just a moment. Let's get the underside of this wing. Alright, that's enough to work with right now. So I'm going to switch back to my dark brown. If you have some already on there that's wet, that's great. Go ahead and clean off that brush. We'll want that dark brown. And we want to go just over the top of both of these. Okay, so we have that light brown line. I'm going in with that dark brown just above it. And this will help it kind of fade in. So it's nice and sharp along the bottom, but along the top it's got a bit of a gradient. And it can be discouraging if you're looking at the whole thing. I know I'm looking at, for a moment there I was looking at the whole face and it gets kind of weird looking. But if you look at just that one spot, focus on that and really feel and really visualize the owl. If you can see the owl and you can see the individual feathers, it'll all come together in time, okay? Just be patient. Now let's take a little bit of a slightly lighter brown as well and show how this body is overlapping the body of the other owl. Just like that. Now going back to this light color, we can create the rings of the eyes. So this is going to be the light rings around the outside. So it's the furthest out circle. The second one that I drew is going to be the black, and then the yellow will go just around that. So we can fill this in with that lighter brown. And I'm giving it some little kind of jagged edges, keeping the feathers really small here. Again, we want symmetry. Picture those eyes really staring at you, on this guy especially. I think that's how I want this one to be, is to be staring right at us directly. So picture the pupils of the eyes staring right at you. The feathers can come out from that. And we can create this nice feathery, these nice feathery ears. These are horned owls. So they've got these ears that look like horns. And they've got all these little feathers inside of those ears. So we want to pull out these little tiny brush strokes. And let me zoom in on that for you guys for a moment. Pulling in those little tiny brush strokes. And it leaves that nice, there's my, there. It leaves that nice line on top. If I can point to it. There we go. Right there. So we're creating the highlight in the inside of the ear. Let's do that on both ears. Keeping in mind that symmetry, I might have to bring this a little bit over the eye on this guy, which will be okay. All right, and then before that, those lighter areas get a chance to dry, let's go ahead and switch back to our brown. So we can get that nice solid area on top of it. It's okay if you got a little bit of the lighter brown still in there. It'll maybe create some smaller feather details. Alright, right here I need to bring the head out just a little bit more to create some symmetry. This side it comes out to there, so it needs to come out to here as well. Awesome. Before I get too carried away on this guy, let's go ahead and jump back to the other one. Let's get the rings for those eyes with a nice light brown there. Drawing it in feather by feather. Really picturing the direction that he's facing. If you can picture that, everything will fall into place, I promise. Alright, then we have this chin right here. I remember I was commenting on that earlier. It goes up. Let me sketch in the line for you. It goes up a bit and then back down. Coming right up to the beak there with those little jagged lines. We can throw that in on this guy as well. And this one kind of goes up, down for the chin, and then out again for the cheeks. And after I get it on there lightly, I want to go in with the darker one just to smooth it out a little bit on both of them, especially along the top edge of it. So by smoothing it out, I just mean we're adding some of that darker color on top, using it to kind of blend in a little bit so it doesn't feel so much like a stripe, but more so a highlight that gradually fades in and gradually fades out. Alright, we have one more light detail that I want to add, and that is the horns on this guy, this owl. So it's going to come down right over to here. Out to the tip of the ear there. And whatever shape you end up with, like I ended up with a bit of an L, whatever shape you end up with, do the same on the other side. So it comes out and then it angles up. That'll give them a bit of personality. Each one will be different. This one's got a bit more of a triangle, and that one has a bit more of an L. Now, one thing that's coming up here for me is that I was having some trouble really finding the symmetry. And that is a really common thing to have happen, okay? It can be tricky to keep track of that. It can be tricky to see it in a non-biased way. If we're following lines, we just don't think about it. One useful trick, hold something up to split it in half, and maybe you'll see it clearly then. Like I can see that this ear is bigger than that one. Another good trick is to flip it upside down. All right? That way, if there's any imperfections on it, anything that's not quite right, you'll hopefully see it at that point. So make sure that the cheeks match up, that the horns match up, the eyes match up. So my ear can just come out a little bit further. It's going to be overlapping this guy, but that's okay. He can still see around him. It's more important that we've got that symmetry. We don't want to have this one's ear not be the right size just because we don't want to cover up the one behind it. In fact, covering that up creates some really cool perspective. That was accidental. It wasn't part of the plan today. But that's part of the fun of painting, all right? We always end up with something weird happening, right? Now, one other thing I want to do on mine before we go any further is add a little bit of life to this wing. So maybe check both of your wings, or just both owls in general, and see if there's any any lines that just don't look interesting or don't look like they quite fit. On mine, this one looks very rigid. It's like he's holding his arms out, maybe angry or something. I want to give him a little bit more of a shoulder here. And then I want these feathers to feel really fluffy. So I want to give it a little bit of a sharp kind of curve out here at the bottom. Already I like that a lot better. All right, these are looking good, you guys. Just gonna hold that up for a moment. Pause it there if you need to see that up close. And they're not perfect yet, okay? They're really not perfect yet. But there's some parts that we can start to see are really the way we want them to be. And the few spots that are actually where they're going to be in our finished product, right here, the chin and the wings, the main body, the bottom of the rings of the eyes, and the ears. Those should all be pretty close to how we want them, okay? The area around the beak and the eyes is still a bit messy. It's still a work in progress. And that's okay. All right. Now I'm on the, if you're following along with your instructions, I'm on step 3 there, by the way. And we're at the bottom part of that paragraph. We're going to be painting on the circles for the eyes now. So this is going to be yellow, mostly. We'll add a little bit of red to it. Mine, I guess, already had a little bit of red in it, so that's okay. And then we'll want a bit of white. So this is one trick with acrylic paints. White always will help the color, I guess I should never say always. It'll help the color to cover a little bit better. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of red as well. I had a little bit in it, but I want a tiny bit more. And then let's get a bit more yellow in there. So the white just helps it to glow a little bit more, and it'll make it less transparent, so we're not seeing through it. We want these eyes to be really bright. Now again, let's look at the example. I'm actually going to make it bigger for a moment. Look at that. All right, so we can see those beautiful yellow eyes. And they're going to go right up against the light highlights. This one's got a bit of a dark circle around, or a dark ring around the yellow, which is super cool. So we can try to do that as well. But we want this to be right on the edge of our light highlights. So right here, I'm going to just go ahead and jump in and just go for it, okay? If you need to circle it a few times, that can be a really helpful trick. And then you just commit and you do that circle. And symmetry is our most important goal here. So go ahead and get it symmetrical on the other side. Even if it seems a bit small or a bit large or not quite right in a variety of other ways, we just want them to match. Now, if it is too small or too big, we can make those adjustments. If it's too small, just expand the yellow. We can always cover up some of it with the black. If it's too large, just continue right now and make note of that, and we can come back in with that light brown and touch it up a little bit later. Moving on over to the other one, I'm going to do the same thing. Creating that nice yellow circle. And here it's going to go behind the eye, or behind the ear of this other one. There we are. So they're kind of spooky at the moment. But now I want to do the rest of the eyes so we can see it really coming together here. I'm going to go in with some black. So we haven't used the black yet. Get a little bit of black on your palette. I hope you guys are more organized than me on your painting palette. Mine's looking a little messy, but I'm having fun, and that's the important part. So with that small brush, I'm going in with the black now and creating the centers of the eyes. And we want this to be a little bit more off to the side, okay? So like, oh here, it'll make more sense when you see it, what I mean. So it's going to go following that circle, and it goes right up over here, right up against the top of the eye, right up against the overlapping ridge of the crown. And then we want that symmetry. Make sure, so like this guy, I'm really seeing him, that's his line of sight right there. He's looking out that direction. So keep that in mind. We want the circles to really match that. We want symmetry in their size, symmetry in the direction that they're facing. And it all stems from really seeing where it is looking, where the movement of this piece is going. If you're not sure where he's looking, the painting is going to reflect that. All right, this guy as well. So what I was trying to say is we don't just want a circle in the dead center like this. Okay? I can throw that on there to show you what I mean. So that's what it looks like with the circle in the dead center. Not quite what we're going for. We want it to come up further. Right up against the side here. This one's going to be a little bit easier, at least in my opinion, because we're really picturing him looking right at us. So if you can picture that, if you can feel his intimidating gaze, then just trust the brush stroke to go where it needs to go. Now, I had commented that I really liked that dark ring that the artist of this painting put just along the outside of the yellow too. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that on there. I'm starting out here because we might have it not come all the way in. Maybe right around there it fades out. But that really helps those eyes to pop. Now as I'm painting that, I'm looking at the center there to make sure that they are parallel. Just like that. There we go. Now they look kind of funny because they don't have beaks at the moment. Let's go ahead and throw those beaks on there. And the beaks are just going to be basically an oval, because it's facing us. And I maybe left a little bit too much white around them, so I'll come back in with my brown in a moment. This guy, or at least on mine, he ended up facing a little bit to the side, as I've pointed out. So I want to reflect that also in the beak. I'm going to have this side be a little bit more curved, and this side be a little bit more flat, I think. We'll see how that looks. But they're going right down the center, okay? So the top and the bottom of that oval should be right down the center of the face. And start small, and then gradually grow it if you need to. Now, a few little touch-ups I want to do before we move on to any other spot. I'm going to take a little bit of dark brown and just touch up around those beaks. Any spots that didn't quite get covered. And now I also want to take that light brown and touch up the tops of the eyes here, okay? So there's a few spots where it didn't quite, or where I overlapped the crown here, okay? So I want to take some of those light feathers and come back over those eyes. So it really feels like that crown is coming over it, just like that, right down to the beak. There we go, that is powerful now. On this one as well, I want it to overlap those eyes a little bit. Come down over here, just above the beak there. And out. These guys are looking cute. All right. Now we're going to add in a little bit of shading on them. So their bodies, I think the top half looks really good. We need a little bit more shading down here to make them feel round, make them feel full and well-fed, and to show which one is overlapping a little bit more. So I'm taking this brown that we've mixed, pulling a little bit off to the side, and adding a touch of black to it. If you're feeling daring and you really like colors, one variation is you could try adding one specific color from our brown mix into it, okay? So that would help darken it. So it would have to be either blue or red. My recommendation would be red. And you can make it a darker red-brown. This is a good way to make your paintings unique. Instead of just doing black for shadows, think about what darker colors you have. The yellow and the brown is the lighter. So either of these will help bring that a little bit darker while still maintaining the colorful aspects of this painting. So I have kind of a darker red-brown here now. I'm going to use this in here to create some shading. So this whole bottom section here, I'm going to start along the bottom right here where it'll be getting maybe the least amount of light, and especially right here under the wings. You can create a little bit of a shadow there. Maybe even just throw a couple on the wing. A few along the head. Hope these are showing up on the screen well. It's kind of subtle, but it's very important. You can do a little bit right here underneath that neck, and a bit right here where the body of this owl is going to be overlapping. I'm also going to throw on a few by the beak. And under the chin here to make it feel 3D, like the chin is coming on out. And you can blend these in more. You could even, if you have the dark brown still available, you can blend them in. Or you can leave them on there kind of as feathers. So like if you look at the area underneath this guy's chin, you see a lot of feathers there, which is pretty cool. I'm also going to use this color in the ears a little bit. So we have that those lighter feathers, but we also have a shadow because the ear is going inwards. Same thing over here. Adding in a little bit of shadow around the legs, under this wing. A bit under the chin. And I think that'll do it. All right, this is the main focus of the painting, so we really want to take our time in getting that just right. All right, now we are back to mixing our brown again, okay? Because we're going to be putting these trees in here, so we'll want a nice brown color. Maybe you mixed a whole bunch to begin with, but if not, let's go ahead and redo that. Red, blue, and yellow. All right, find a brown that you like. I know I created a huge mess here, but I think I got it. And let's go ahead and fill in these trees now. Now we're not going to worry about a ton of shading in this, okay? We want the main focus to be on these guys. These trees are just going to be silhouettes. So the same way I was saying, we want to choose our colors and we want to choose which ones we purposefully exclude. In the same way, we want to choose where we put our detail and our focus in that way. We don't need to put detail in every little thing we do. It's okay to have these owls very detailed and the trees be a little bit more representational, and just be a placeholder in it, or a frame. They kind of work as a frame around these guys, highlighting some of the colors. Now make sure you have a little bit of water in your paint. That'll help it to run smoothly and get a nice solid line. And as I was saying, with this being kind of a frame for the main focus, which is the owls, think about the shape. Right here, there's this beautiful curve on the stencil. Don't just follow that. Make sure that you're thinking for yourself and that you're really creating it nice and smooth. If you're just trying to trace the line, it might turn out kind of rough. But if you really tune into what is the goal there, which is to create this nice curved frame, that should make it a little bit easier to get just right. So right here we're creating a branch. I'm focusing on the bottom side because the top is going to be the snow. We'll go back over with white, but leaving it will help it to be a little bit easier for us to cover. Now we've got this big guy over here. And this one, I'm going to just keep it a nice, smooth, straight line. as much as I can. Feel free to get creative with this too. You could make the choice to put a nice curved edge on this one as well. I kind of like the flat in contrast to the curves of the rest of the painting. And I did not mix enough of this color, so I'm back to mixing my brown again. All right, and then I want to create this branch that they're standing on. Now I'm using this big flat brush. And let me show you a trick here in a second. All right, so we're cutting out that area that we want the highlights to be at. All right, the trick that I want to show you, get a little bit of water in the brush, and then get it nice and flat along the side here by pulling it off on the side of your plate. Now you're going to take that brush and just continue this line, okay? So we want to trace that. I'm not even touching the canvas. And then you want to go a little bit past that with a really nice thin line, barely touching the canvas. Just like that. So we're creating these nice thin branches. I can have another one that comes off and connects. We can add some over here while we're at it. Keep them very thin. All right, then we have the branches. Or I guess there's one more on this tree that we'll do. So this one we can have a branch come up here as well. Letting it come off in a few different directions. A few different lengths. And let's get this final branch here in the background. Now don't rush yourself, okay? I know that I was saying that these are just the frames. This isn't the main focus of the painting. But it is important. It sets a tone for the level of care and detail that we're putting into it. If these feel rushed, very few people are going to look and really see the detail and care that we put into the center. So no matter what we're doing, we want to make sure we're giving it all of our attention. We're making that the entire painting. So right here I want to make sure those continue at the same width. And then give the tree a little bit of personality. I really like the way that this branch in the example comes on up there, wiggling up a little ways. And then we've got the other side of it. You can place these however you like. So maybe you have certain areas that brush strokes show through on the background that you're not happy with. You can place this however you'd like, maybe to cover some of those up or to complement them in a different way. All right, so those are all my branches I'm going to put on there. We don't want it to get too crazy, okay? We want the sky to be to shine through very beautifully. And if we cover too much up with these branches, we'll lose that. Now while that's drying, before we add the white for the snow on these, I want to add in a little bit of detail into the back into the owls. So there's a few spots I want to add detail. So going back to that tiny brush and some white paint, we're going to add some highlights into the eyes and on the beaks. So we have to pick a side now. There's no hints in our painting right now that I can see of where the light is coming from. My guess, on mine, it looks like we've got a bit of a highlight along this side of this guy that otherwise would probably be dark. So I'm going to guess that the light is coming from the left, okay? Although either way will probably work with this one. And so we can throw on some little highlights. I'm going to put a little dash of white along the left side of the beaks on each of them to show that that is reflective. And I like to give it a little bit of a space, okay? It's along the left side, but it's not right up crammed against the left edge. There we are. Now let's add some little white highlights into the eyes as well. So just a really thin little line right along that left side of the inner eye. Again, leaving a little bit of a gap so it's not right up against the edge. Let me show that up close. There we go. These sorts of highlights make a huge difference. They really make things pop. Over here as well, same thing. And I know we said that the light was coming from the left side, but on the eyes it'll basically be appearing on both sides. Now if you want to bring in a little bit more contrast to your owls, you can also consider taking a little bit of white, adding a touch of water to help it blend and become a little bit transparent. And we can add this into a few spots in the highlights, or in the brightest areas of their feathers. So maybe right along in the ears. Just a little bit of pure white, watered down. We want to be intentional with these, not just add them everywhere. I'm going to add just a few dashes of this along the eye there for some variation. A little bit along the top here too. It's your choice if you do this or not, okay? I'm just doing a couple. To help brighten up the painting just a little bit. It'll help us really appreciate the darker areas too if we've got a few lighter hints in the painting as well. So that just raised the contrast a little bit from the lightest part and the darkest part inside of the owl's bodies there. All right, I'm going to switch to this smaller filbert brush for the final step of the painting, which is going to be to add the white snow on all these branches. And again, we want to take our time with this, okay? We don't want to rush. It could be really easy to rush this step, but it would definitely show. So get some nice clean white paint if you're all out on your palette. Get a little bit of water on your brush. If your paint water is completely dirty, you'll want to get a little bit more clean paint water, just so that we're having this really pure snow. Brown snow wouldn't have quite the same effect. All right, and we can go ahead now. And I'm going to start with, I like to normally pick a spot that's low risk, okay, to just test it out. You can also test it out on another surface or on your painting palette even. I'm picking this branch. It seems like one that won't be a big deal if we goof it up a little. So I'm just going to go on here and throw some white just above the branch there. Really picture it as snow, okay? The more you can picture that and feel it piled up, the better. So when I was picturing that snow there, I was seeing how it would pile up close to the tree, and as it goes out, it gets a little bit thinner. Some of those details, if you're just tracing a line along the top, you'll miss out on some of those details. So right here, nice and piled up against the tree, with a little bit of texture to it. And then as it comes out here, it's going to thin out as the branch thins. And fade off. Up here I can put a little bit of snow in between these two branches and then stuck along the side of that left one. Anything that the snow could pile up on reasonably, let's go ahead and do that. Even maybe some of these branches that that stop, we can actually continue it with a little bit of a frosted branch like this. That's maybe a branch that's going out the other direction, so we're seeing the top of it and not the bottom. We can create a little bit of a layering effect. So like on this one right here, as I was just saying, we're seeing the top edge of this branch maybe. So if we're seeing the top edge, let's go ahead and have this part overlap that one. Create some really cool perspective. You can get a little bit chunkier right here where the branch splits. It'd be a bit thicker there. And you can have it stop as it gets to the body here, so we can really see where the owl is in contrast to that branch that's behind him. And we can see the difference this is making. That's very beautiful. You can add as much or as little as you'd like. I'm going to go all out with this snow. I really like it. So, in my imagination, this branch is coming up kind of sharp, so the snow's not going to be piled so much on that. There we are. keep going at your own pace. This is a step that going into the painting, I wasn't imagining that I'd see so much in it, but it's really a fun one to explore. So you really get to choose which branches are overlapping which ones. So you can choose, for instance, this one I'm going to say is going out the other direction. So we don't start seeing the snow until right here, where it peaks out on the other side. And even though we're in a much lighter area now, I want to still add in a few little frosted branches. We can just barely see them, but it helps it feel like it's a real gradient. It's a lot of hidden detail that is fading away into the lighter area. All right, now the big section here, we want to have a whole lot of snow piled up right along these guys. Right where they're standing. Notice the areas where I'm really creating this big, chunky pile of snow and how it comes down onto the branch here as well, creating that texture. Then we can choose how we want this to go. I'm going to have the branch come in a little way, so it's like it's right up against the tree here, and the snow is piled up. Leave the paint on nice and thick in the snow pile area so it feels thick. So we've got a whole bunch of snow on it. Down here then we can add in a little valley of snow. And up here maybe we can say that's too steep for the snow to pile on. And the rest of that would be too. So that looks like we are about there then. If you'd like to add any more frosted branches, like right here, it looks like I could use a few more. You can use your thinner brush too for some of those. Awesome, you guys. I think we did it. So this has been a wonderful painting. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And we've got these two cute little owls. I see now where this painting came from. It's totally a Valentine's Day painting with the pink sky and the two owls. So we're a little bit late for Valentine's Day, but it doesn't hurt to share this with your love. Yeah, it's a really beautiful painting. And I hope that you learned something about yourself. I always try to express this and bring this focus back at the end of each painting. That's why we're here. That's what we're trying to do. We want to grow as artists and grow in our self-expression. And so I hope you learned something about yourself. Like I know for myself, there were a few parts where I was getting frustrated. You know, I was mixing that brown and I don't know if I quite got the right color. I think it might have been a little bit green for a while. But, you know, you just got to be patient with yourself. And it's important to notice those things, become aware of them, and then keep going. Building an art practice is difficult, okay? So I applaud you guys one more time for committing to this, to paint weekly. That is huge. If you do that, you will be a master artist. That's what I'm working towards, consistency. So thank you guys so much. As always, feel free to take a picture of your painting and go to our Facebook page. You'll see a link that I posted to this video, and if you leave your picture in the comment section below that, I'd love to take a look at the paintings and see how you did. Yeah, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. But thank you guys so much for tuning in for Creative Box Live, and we will see you next week. Peace out.